Hey, life group leaders and coaches, here with Mr. PJ Lewis.
Yep.
I'm Dave Albald, PJ campus pastor at the North Campus. I'm over at the Fig Garden campus, and we have been making these training videos just to loft out ideas to be helpful as you're, coaching leaders, or if you're a leader yourself. Today we're talking about the idea of communion in a life group setting, and so I think PJ, big idea. As we've talked to life group leaders, some of them have even asked questions like, is it okay to do communion outside of a Sunday morning setting?
Yeah. I've kind of gotten the same thing, and I understand that it's like communion. You do that on a Sunday morning. You do that in church. That's where you do it. That's the context you do it. But really, when you look at God's Word, that's not really the pattern that's even displayed from the very beginning that I found. Acts chapter 2, church formed, 3,000 people are saved in that day, and then right after this says, they were committed to one of the things, breaking of bread, which probably means they were just eating together, but also included having that communion feast, having that Passover feast together, and they did that from house to house. So even in that context, they were really doing it in life groups during that time. So I know how it's kind of happened over the years. I think, this is where we want it to be done, and maybe it's a safe place that maybe people feel safe, safe place to do it. I know it's done right here, but really I think that there's a way big opportunity for life groups to build community together and also connect to God together by doing communion with each other in a community.
Yeah. You mentioned something in there of just wanting to do it right, or even like thinking of the early church, knowing that there wasn't an apostle in every house where they were meeting and doing these meals. So if I was a life group leader, I'm like, I want to do this right, and do I need to think about the type of bread? Am I okay to be doing this as a life group leader? Just those kinds of things.
Yeah, you piped it on this too, because I think we both agree that it's not about like there's one certain way to do it right. There might be a way to do it wrong. There could be, if we're not concentrating on the right things, what it's about. But when you keep in mind, it's not really a lot about the details that make communion what it is. It's what the whole thing represents and what you leave with. Remember what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, that the purpose for communion is to proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. So what are you going to do that's going to proclaim the Lord's death until he comes? And of course the elements are probably a key thing. Having something that represents, a drink that represents his blood. And a bread that represents his body. But if it's like, well, what kind of bread? What's communion bread? What does that look like? What's communion wine, or grape juice, or whatever? I don't think that really matters. I think we talked about earlier, like there could be maybe a certain thing you have to represent, like a certain bread that might, I don't know, what would you say, like, hey, let's have Ritz crackers or Cheez-Its or something like that. You don't want to distract, it, but really when it comes down to it, just have something just common bread, maybe some common little juice, and have at it. Just knowing what it represents. Would you add anything to that?
I'd totally agree, and then I think the big piece is then going, how can this be meaningful, knowing that when we do it in a larger context, it signifies the same thing, but we're in some ways limited in a larger context to the creativity that we can do in representing and proclaiming the Lord's death until he comes. And so when we talk about what it can look like in a life group setting, I think that's when it gets really fun and
I think this one, it can be in some ways better, more powerful than we can. Like you told me some of your ideas earlier, like what? Like a couple ways you can do it.
Heard of groups, taking a bowl of juice, and then writing out the sins that they feel like they have felt shame for in their life, and that have happened, and then laying them in the juice to signify the atonement of Christ's blood over their sins as they take communion, or of being able to pass around the bread, and as they take the bread, being able to share each person as they take the bread. Here's what it means for me to know that Christ's body has been broken for me and his blood has been shed on my behalf. Here's what that means for me. And so they're sharing along the way and proclaiming the Lord's death until he comes. And so things like that. I don't know, you had some ideas as well.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. I've seen life groups that maybe are couples, the husband serving the wife serving the husband. Or, even taking the bread and taking a piece off and passing it around. Everybody takes the piece off, together as they're going around. Makes the community, makes it feel like community feel. We're doing this together. We're proclaiming the Lord's death as a group. and individuals.
Yeah, it's great. So when we talk about the ideas of helping people connect to God and to each other in every neighborhood, this is a great way as a group that you can connect to each other and to God through the idea of taking communion in your life group. So
yeah,
yeah,
have fun.